Welcome to another week of Celtic Chalk Talk. We go through it every Monday. We look at the Celtics and see how they did over the week and have some thoughts about it. My name's Steve Purciello, lifelong Celtic fan, always rooted for them, always loved them since Bill Russell. Will always be a Celtic fan for the rest of the years. Been around a while, watched a lot of great Celtic games and seen a lot of great Celtic teams that I could talk about all day. But today we're going to talk about the last week. It was an interesting week. The first game of the week was against Indiana. That was a fascinating game. The first half, Boston was terrible. They were down 20. Indiana couldn't miss. And you sat there and you said to yourself, how the heck is this team so bad? In the second half, you learned. What was interesting about that, Indiana couldn't miss in the first half. They were just incredible. 51% from the floor. 60% from three. They made their first couple of threes. And it was just one of them things where you sit there and say, it's just not our night. Down by about 20 at half. Boston comes out in the second half. And they're just trading baskets for a few minutes. Mazzulla calls timeout, which was an interesting thing. He took a lot of courage to do this. And he just replaced four guys with his bench. And one of them was Anthony Simons, who had a very good quarter. And Boston suddenly, the game was changing, and they were down by 10 at the end of the third quarter. And you could feel the change happening. Simons was a key in that quarter in getting it down. But now in the fourth quarter, that's when it really changed. Boston just took over and really won going away. One of the key parts of that game was Jaylen Brown. Boston had about a second or two on the shot clock. Brown caught the ball in the corner near the baseline and the sideline and threw up a three and hit it. And Boston was winning by 2, made it a 5-point game. It was an incredibly great shot. Put you to mind of a couple of years ago when Boston beat Indiana in the playoffs and Jaylen Brown hit that big three to put it and send it to overtime. It was on the opposite end of the court, but it was out of the corner and so on and so forth. So that was just a great thing. Now, in the game, it's amazing how Boston, first it was Josh Minot, then Jordan Walsh, now it's Ugo. Ugo Gonzalez, when he becomes a better offensive threat, look out. But in the game, he had 6 points, 11 rebounds, and his usual disruptions, frustrating Mathurin, just playing his normal game. And that's good enough. And that's one of the things that helped Boston throughout the game, that defense and those intangibles that Ugo brings. The next night, not next night, but Friday night, they played Indiana again, this time in Indiana. And again, it started out the same way. Here we go. Made a bunch of threes to start the game. And it just was, here we go again to start the game. Boston down 10 at the end of the quarter. Second quarter, Boston. It's incredible. The more I think about it, they scored 47 points. 47 points in a quarter. Now, normally, I guess a team gets between probably about 25 to 30 possessions in a quarter. 47 points. That's 1.6 points per possession. Incredible quarter. And that began the rout. They just beat them. It was a beatdown after the first quarter. Sam Hauser, who has not had a great year, finally, and I mean it, finally went off. He had 7 threes. And so on. And if for nothing else, it brings his percentage up. And if you do want to trade him, it looks a little better than numbers for the year if they do decide to go in that way. The win was more workmanlike after the first quarter. Jaylen Brown again does it every night, 30 points. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. It just that 47 points was just, can't even begin to talk about that because it was incredible. The other guy that was great on offense was Payton. Pritchard managed the 29, but he kept getting in the paint. And he has that little 12-footer that he creates space and then hits this. And it's always all net. It's just really beautiful to watch for a little guy like that to hold his own doing the things he does. Now we could talk about Portland. Oh, God, what a bad night. A lot of people would say they were looking ahead and it was a setup game and all those other things. No, Boston didn't execute in the fourth quarter. They didn't, or down the stretch. They didn't defend. They allowed Portland to drive and kick. and get open threes throughout the game. And guys like Shaden Sharp were on shooting real well, and it hurt Boston, obviously, and it beat Boston. The other factor that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks was rebounding defensively. Klingon had a tremendous game. He's big, he's wide, and he's thick, and it brings something up that we've talked about a whole lot. Cada can hold his own against guys who are not thick. Klingon just being so much bigger and stronger was a problem for Brown. For Cada. Cada couldn't really do much, and this guy rebounded, neither could Garza. And it brings back the question, does Boston need a wide, big-bodied center, thick, big-bodied center, so they can compete? Down the stretch, Portland out-executed Boston. That's the best way to put it. They got what they want, and again, Boston never guarded well in this whole game. Now, beside that, the other takeaway I have is you need to win. Brown got his 30, and like he always does, but you need either Pritchard or White to play well. Boston shot poorly, and both of them did not have great offensive games. And by playing well offensively, neither one was able to do much on that. Defensive rebounding, again, we'll go back to that, 72%. Boston got on shots Portland took on the rebound. So that means 28%. That's a high number. You want to get near 80 or above. So that was one of the reasons they lost. The other we have to think about is that 29% from three. This is a team that lives on it. And it brings me to mind something else. Boston plays well almost when it's a bigger game. They shoot well and so on. When there's not as big a game, it seems like they're not really executing or playing as well and as sharp as they usually are. And that's an important piece to consider. Missoula in the game played a zone for much of the game. By the end of the third quarter, I wrote in my notes to get the heck out of the zone. But I understand it because they couldn't contain any. But Portland threading the zone by hitting open threes throughout. They hit open threes through much of the game. So those were the stories in the game. The game was a frustrating game. No doubt Boston's a better team, but they didn't play. And that's the way it is. Now, boy, let's talk about a couple different things. Every game, it seems that somebody on the bench for Boston takes over. Monday, Hugo. Friday was Hauser. Last night, they didn't play well on the bench. Simons had he did a little bit offensively, but not as well as you'd hope. And they really didn't get much with Jaylen Brown. And that's important. The way Garza and Kate, we go back and forth on it, I guess after watching this many games, they need a big man who's wide. Daniel Gafford might be somebody off the top of my head that could help. He's not an all-star, but he'll rebound and keep Boston in those games. Of course, we have to keep thinking, though. Jason Tatum's going to come back, and he gets usually 9 to 10 rebounds a game, and that's going to help the defensive rebounding. The loss to Portland was a wake-up loss. Boston has to play hard every night. I don't believe they have as much talent as teams like the Knicks or Detroit. They can play with them if the shots are falling and they're playing defensively hard, and containing the ball defensively is the whole game. They didn't do it against Portland. That's why one of the reasons why they lost. Brown, let's talk about Jaylen Brown for a minute. Jaylen Brown has nine games in a row scoring over 30 points. Now, to tell you how sacred or how wonderful that is, Larry Bird is the only other person to do it. Now, we talk about great Celtics. Naturally, Larry Bird would be the second best behind Bill Russell. And Larry Bird, not a bad player. Now, Jaylen Brown is approaching that in his numbers and what he's doing. Think about that for a while. That tells you so much about him. Last night, he was the offensive star, although down the stretch, he had a driving layup, and he was called. His elbow hit the defender in the face, and it was a flagrant on Jaylen. They went down. Denny Avia missed the 2 foul shots, but they got the possession and wiped away the Celtic layup, which at first when the whistle blew, I thought it was a 3-point play. Boston would be in business. That sums up the week. We have another week starting up tomorrow night. Boston's in Utah, and we'll be back again next month. Thank you for listening, and have a good week.